That's a good idea. That's a good idea. Okay, 1 o'clock. All right, let's call the meeting to order. Start with the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, here to the Monday, June 16th general session of the Town Trustees. Welcome to the folks that are on Zoom. I will ask the Secretary Treasurer to call the roll.
Scott Horowitz.
Here.
Ed Warner, present. Chip Marin. Here. Joe McLaughlin. Here. Matt Parson. Here. You're all here, Mr. President.
All right. All right. So we got through that. Next trustee meeting.
Chip, turn on your,
I got you.
Joe.
Um,
Please.
Next trustee meeting, July 14th, 10:30 a.m. And then followed by our regular session at 1 p.m.
We only have one meeting in July.
Right. One meeting in July. Thank you for
that.
making that announcement. We did get some communications. It's in everybody's box, so you can review that at your own time frame.
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion to dispense with reading it.
I'll make a motion.
Seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay. We do have a discussion with some folks that are here, and your topic is subject CCA lumber. If you want to either come here or go there, you could come here, I guess.
Yeah.
Right? You want to go there or here?
Does this get recorded, in which case I should be at the microphone?
Yes.
Either or, either way. You have to sign in and state your name for the record. Yeah, sit down.
Yeah, bite.
Sit down and make yourselves comfortable.
Glad we're in the right place.
Yeah, you're in the right place.
While you're writing, let me explain. This is about work that we did over 30 years ago. So we have had to spend a lot of time looking over old stuff. So it took quite a bit of preparation because we haven't done this research since the early 90s. That was when all this research was going on.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
Okay.
I don't think that'll get you.
Okay.
You'll be good.
Hello, for the record, I am Pedrick Weiss. You can call me Pete. As Judy said, we did this research on CCA treated wood materials in the estuaries of the South Fork, starting in 1990 and continuing through 1996 or 7 thereabouts. So, and we have a bunch of publications on it in peer-reviewed journals, scientific articles, and if someone wants to make a copy of something, let us know. But these are the only ones we have left from all that time ago.
This is not all, this is the papers that we happen to have in our apartment. There are others. This is not the complete of everything we
Package.
did.
Gotcha.
But we feel that this is what is
But-
relevant anyway.
Okay.
I'll give you, I don't think.
Are these your originals? Are
This
these
is-
copies?
This is
Or?
just
No, these-
copies of a diagram that sort of summarizes our findings.
Okay.
So there's one.
Drawn by our daughter in 1992.
Yeah,
All right.
so pass them along.
Thank you.
It's-
Okay. I should say that pressure-treated wood, or CCA, it's called CCA for copper, chromium, and arsenic. And these three metals, toxic metals, are incorporated into wood under pressure, usually southern pine. It's the most common construction material used nowadays, apparently, for framing a house or for building a dock. And if you're building a deck behind your yard or making a playground, whatever, for your kids, it's 1/4 pound per cubic foot of wood. And somewhat higher, if it's ground contact, you're going to drive a post into the ground and build your deck on that. It tends to be 0.6 pounds per cubic foot. But what goes into the water to build a dock, to build a bulkhead. It's anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 pounds per cubic foot of wood. So there's a lot of stuff there.
About a cubic foot, and you've got over a pound of metal.
Toxic metals. The idea being to preserve the wood, it's called a wood preservation technique, so that boring animals, especially in the marine environment, get poisoned by it and don't make your wood porous, I would say, for shipworms and that sort of thing. The original publication on this was done in India in 1979, finding that copper and chromium and arsenic all leached out into the treated wood into the water. It's a lab study. All three metals are known to be toxic, and copper in particular is toxic especially toxic to many marine organisms, both plant and animal.
We tend to think that arsenic is really awful, we think about arsenic. But in terms of all the marine life, it's copper. That's the damaging.
Well, that's why they make copper paint for the bottom of the boats.
Exactly.
It's anti-fouling paint.
Exactly. And that's that paint is on the bottom of my boat is 40% copper. So it's a lot of stuff, and a little zinc added in. Anyway, so in 1990 we started studying this. For example, well, the wood preserving people have always said, no, it doesn't leach out. It just affects the animals that try to eat into the wood. So we put little pieces of wood in laboratory glassware in salt water, and found that it does indeed come out. What we had, and then we took the water that piece of wood has been sitting in and exposed, the common killifish people use for bait, right? We had always been studying for many years the embryos of this fish. It's a good experimental animal to have in the lab. And we found that the embryos died. The fish eggs did not survive to hatch. Using a piece of wood that was 1% of the total volume of the water that was in, or twice as much that, or twice as much that. Another experiment, I've always had pieces of untreated wood in another container for control experiments to show that the wood itself has nothing to do with it. All the embryos in the untreated wood survived to hatch, to swim around, as you would expect. Okay. Another experiment that was done using fiddler crabs. This is Judy's favorite research animal. If you pretend you're a bird and you grab a crab by the leg, the animal automatically drops the leg off and scuttles away, and the bird is left with nothing but a foot, a leg from the crab. So they regenerate very readily. So we did limb regeneration studies and found that there's quite a bit of inhibition. It slowed down the rate of regeneration of the new limbs on the fiddler crabs. Another experiment, raising two different species of seaweeds. One you may know as sea lettuce, another, I don't know if it has a common name. No, anyway, two different species. And taking the common mud snails that you see on the edge of the bay, just a few inches of water right by the edge. And so they would eat that algae and they would die. Leave it in long enough and the seaweed would lose its chlorophyll and get pale. And the sea lettuce would look like a piece of used tissue paper. So we took the same pieces of wood that had been in the water for 2 weeks and for those experiments, and then we put the same piece of wood that had been eluting, had been soaking out for 2 weeks in another container, repeated the experiments, and again, 2 more weeks in fresh water, so it's been eluting for a total of a month. The same things happened, although not quite as deadly as the first time around. So mud snails became inactive and they died, retreated into their shells and stopped moving. They were dead. And the fiddler crabs were not able to regenerate their legs, and the fish embryos were not able to hatch in this kind of water. So this was a lab experiment. Also, it took the, since we're here in Southampton, that we were doing this as guests for the summer at Southampton College, the late Southampton College.
If you have any questions,
Yeah,
you know, ask.
please feel the,
You
Yeah,
know,
that was my only question. So this was a Southampton
It was
college study.
yes. We had been guests ever since the New York Ocean Science Laboratory in Montauk closed. We have been doing our summer research here instead of at Rutgers University in New Jersey, out here where we had clean water to work with.
So I have a question. So did you give any of this presentation or information to anyone from, like, say, the state of New York Department of Environmental
This is
Conservation?
all
Because,
published
right,
material.
see, our
Yeah.
issue is that we are one regulatory authority. There are many regulatory authorities that do the permitting work on our underwater lands, and their regulations for materials are out of spec with ours. And I don't understand that. In other words, if it's that much of a problem, we should all be in lockstep because the water is traveling all over, right? So, you know, knowing today what's going on in our environment, you know, globally, you want to conserve and do the best that you possibly can for the environment, right? With it utilizing sensible information and common sense. And it's just not common sense to me that the permit language on many of the other regulatory authorities on the same project is different than ours, okay? So, and that's why I say ours is the most restrictive. And I was wondering if, you know, you have, you know, ever approached anyone from the New York State DEC with these findings? Because really, you know, if their permit language was in synchronicity with our permit language, we wouldn't be questioning this, okay, in terms of who's not doing this correctly, you know? The other thing is that, you know, back in the day, bulkheads, they were creosote, and then the bulkheads themselves were CCA. Now we're using vinyl bulkheads. And a lot of this material, the treatment and the protocols have changed on this pressure-treated material. And some of it is not even in the water. It's not touching the water. It's behind the bulkheads in the engineering of this. And it just, you know, we are not engineers and not experts on this, but we're trying to learn. So I really appreciate you coming here and spending your time to, you know, give the board information, because that's how we learn.
I heard that the reason you had asked us to come was that the wood preservers had been pressuring you.
We're taking everything into account because, like as Scott has said, we're having a jurisdictional problem. It's not necessarily that the trustee board has made any decision whatsoever of whether we're going to go forward with CCA or not. This is like
Fact finding.
this is preliminary before a preliminary decision.
Nobody's pressuring this
I
board.
thought the wood
No,
preservers.
no,
had
no, no,
come
no.
to visit.
We saw it.
Yeah,
no,
they've been
no
to
one-
us twice in public and once in private.
They have visited.
Yeah, because
We
we're,
did a presentation. You can watch it on.
Correct.
Very similar to you're making a presentation to us.
correct,
We're
they
making
did
a
the same,
presentation.
but they're not
Sales
pressuring
pitch.
us to do anything.
Making a sales pitch.
Well, no.
I had
What?
back,
We approached them.
We
We
approached
them. We're
them
asking
because,
for information.
right, because what we're trying to understand, and in conversations that we have had with other regulatory authorities, are saying, listen, if you follow the protocols that are in place now, times have changed, and the laws have changed, regulations have changed, and if you follow the protocols that are in place, that are in our permit standards, meaning their permit standards, it's safe, okay? But we're not sure of that. So how do you learn about that? You have to meet with people and listen to what it is that they have to say. That way,
Team scientists.
correct, exactly. And that's why I say thank you very much for coming here to speak to the board, because we're trying to learn. When you have these other regulatory authorities that you would say, and that's why I said, you speak to anybody at the state about this, you'd think that they would have a staff of experts, right, that are helping them craft their permit language. Because you have to understand, we could, right now, as we're sitting here right now, people are utilizing these Micron azole, or they're using all these other products that are, right, ACQ, that are not, they're not allowable under our regulations, but they're allowable under other regulatory authorities. The water travels, okay? Then there is the confusion that's created by the contractors because we own some of the underwater lands in the villages, and these products are going into these projects, which creates a further issue, and that is, how do we enforce this? You follow me? Because if we're going to have consistency in water quality policy, you have to be able to have appropriate enforcement. And when you have such confusion and ambiguity from all the regulatory authorities and the various permits that you have to achieve in order to do the project, it creates a very heavy lift for this board. So we're trying to learn about what is going on here. Why is this so much difference in what we've been asking for and what these others are asking for? So we're not looking to make any decisions that are rash or snap. We're trying to figure out from a common sense perspective what's going on, okay? You get me? There's a lot of different information. The next step that we're going to have, and I'm so thrilled that you came in here today because this is great, is that we want to invite some of the folks in from the EPA and the DEC, just like you came in, and say, what's the thought process and why are you out of spec with what we do here? You follow me? Where's the common sense in this?
Yeah, what I had seen after our series of papers came out was that it was action on the part of individual towns. There are a bunch of towns on Cape Cod, but not all of the county that is Cape Cod. And some towns in New Jersey, and some towns like you. East Hampton also.
East Hampton,
Southampton,
Southampton.
yeah, it was all
Riverhead
approved.
restricts
Yeah.
it.
It was a matter of this kind of thing being decided not at a state level or a county level, but at a town level. In Massachusetts, and I didn't learn anything about Connecticut, but New Jersey and here.
Right.
Yeah, but the issue that we are running into, because there is jurisdictional problems with the villages, but also the fact that utilizing of some of the hardwoods that we're getting from the tropics aren't holding up as well as we would like. So what we're really running into is, if the state and the EPA are allowing it, is if a homeowner comes along and says, why are we following your mandates? Like what?
Because I don't think anywhere a state has or the EPA has worked on this. I mean, it seems to be.
Well, the EPA has standards that they base their, and so, but what we're worried about is having a homeowner come and say, look, the state and the EPA allow it. We don't care what you guys. And they go ahead and they build CCA and then we have no substantiation.
Right. See, this is not. There's no pressure. There's no pressure from anybody on this board to make any of these decisions. But the board has a responsibility to look at things, okay, and look at things appropriately and sensibly. And we're trying to learn. And how you learn is you study, you talk to people, and like you do. And that's why I appreciate you folks taking the time. But because we have to deal with it with many levels, and then we have to deal with it from an enforcement perspective, right? Yeah. And it is a difficult balancing act to do that. And then you take a step back and you say, where's the common sense? People say, well, they're not concerned about the rainforest, but yet we're concerned about global warming and we're concerned about climate change, and that's a global issue. So you have to really take a hard look at what are the best practices, what makes the most sense. Nobody here wants to put pesticides or chemicals to harm anything in the environment of the bay or the sanctuaries of the clams that we have been working so hard to produce. But we want to make sure that perhaps it's a good start of a conversation that we can have with the other regulatory authorities to say, okay, our board's been working on this for quite some time. This is something that's going to take a lot of time because it's a complex issue, and say, what's your rationale? Why are you out of spec with what we do for all this period of time if there's all this information? And make it a lot easier for the board to maintain consistency in policy and have enforcement. There's another aspect to it, because you don't have it. Let's say you're contractors now, and you have all these different permits, and this says you do it this way, and this one says you do it that way. And then you get a bid from one person, and it's substantially less, all right? They get the job. Why? They're not using the proper material, but then there's no ramifications for that. So where are we going? We're going in a bad direction. So what the board has to do is say, time out, slow down. What's going on here? Why do we have differences in these specifications if this is something that is not good for our environment, right? And call everybody in around the table and say, what are we going to do about this? But you have to start with educating yourself, right? And the board, so that we know what we have to do. And that's why I applaud you for coming in. Thank you.
Should Pete keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
In the time that you were doing your research from the 90s to how many years you,
It was all in the early 90s.
Early
And it goes back
Mid-90s.
into the, but it's all
Did-
30 years ago.
did you make any presentations to any boards, like trustee boards like us, or townships, or anybody that, I'm just really,
This is the first time I can recall being invited to.
Well, there you go.
That this is the whole crux of the matter.
And there you go. Right? So we can't be experts on there's various different treatments and various different.
Somehow, within a few years of when these things got published, somehow, I don't know if the people that were trustees in the 1990s, some of them may still be around.
Well, Eric wanted to be here today, but his wife was dealing with breast cancer issues.
Was East Hampton Town was the first
But-
one to pass?
But you're-
1995.
I knew about some towns on Cape Cod. I heard about it because the scientists I knew there said, but we didn't go and proselytize the town saying you should ban this stuff.
However,
But it happened in some places.
people in East Hampton who are aware of this,
Yeah, the East Hampton.
the Department of Natural Resources perhaps.
It was Larry Penny. I think.
Larry Penny, yes.
Yeah, it must have been Larry Penny.
Somehow the information got through so that when the town was rebuilding the town dock on 3 Mile Harbor, they used recycled plastic lumber
See, all of our projects
instead of CC.
none of our projects have ceased. None of the trustees, let me clarify that. Right?
Yeah.
None of the trustees' projects are violating any of this. We use the proper, green heart. Sometimes it doesn't hold up. It's not working out. Okay. We're concerned, there are microplastics that are breaking free of the vinyl bulkheads that are getting into the marine life as well. Are we gonna walk away from that now? So I think we have to be careful with what we do,
We
right?
know a whole lot more about plastics now than we did.
Well, I'll tell you, actually,
90s.
Diana Gobler, Chris's wife, she's actually my direct boss at West Hampton School. And one of the projects she's working on right now is microplastics in shellfish. And she told me that the vast majority of the microplastics that end up in shellfish comes from our clothes.
Yes.
It comes
that's
out of the
correct.
dryer vents and off of our clothes,
Comes out of the washing machine and the dryer.
and
I
it
mean,
floats
that's
in the air
what
and it goes
Yeah,
right
boy.
into the bay.
Yeah.
I can talk to you for hours about microplastics.
We don't have,
Going to talk about wood.
right, there's no.
We're trying to find out
Right.
options.
Correct.
Right now, we're on the table trying to find out options because, we had the CCA. Ideally, would I love to see somebody start to harvest locust posts? That would be ideal. That would hold up longer than anything. But the infrastructure is not there, and you have people that want these. How about rocks? Rocks would be an ideal, efficient solution to a lot of these projects. But
100%.
the regulatory issues
Right.
that we have with agreement between all the regulatory agency to utilize a resource that is a ferry right away is so difficult. You need the thing blessed by a pope in order to put it in the water. We're trying to make steps whereby we're working with the Department of Environmental Conservation and the feds.
Correct. So,
So that we're not in a litigation lawsuit when somebody says they're allowing it.
correct, correct. Okay,
So,
so we have no,
More about our research, or
Yes.
should we talk?
no, no,
about
no.
I'd love to hear-
No, no, we
policy
could,
with you?
well, but the thing is that we're policy. You follow me?
We're size, I dabble in
understand-
policy.
I understand that, but what our problem is, we don't have any pressure to change anything. We have no resolution on the table to be voted on for this board to take any action. What we have is a lot of questions. There's no reason for hysteria or concern among the public. What this is a board that is working through, trying to make determinations of why there is not consistency in policy. You understand? And how do we have proper enforcement, okay, in our township that makes sense, because that's what we need to do. So nobody should be worried about this. There's no push.
So-
But give us your information, because we then have to go to the other regulatory authorities, and we need to have an intelligent conversation with them.
So Pete should continue with his talk, and then you can ask us any
Beautiful.
question you like.
At any rate, so those first studies that I described, if you look at this diagram, so we've done A. Water is receiving these toxic metals from the pressure-treated wood, and where is it going? So we did field studies at Southampton College on Fort Pond, the angled pieces of 2x6, foot-long panels of 2x6s, treated wood, untreated wood, and recycled plastic lumber hanging off the dock. And then after a month, and 2 months, 3 months, we see what is growing on them. There was less stuff growing on the less fouling organisms growing on the panels that were of the treated wood. You have fewer species, there was less biological diversity, and there was less total weight of organisms. And then another study was taking the 2 species of algae that were most common here and collected that from bulkheads in Fort Pond and in Middle Pond and from rocks nearby. Analyzed the algae to be sure 3 metals were taken up by the algae. So now we're dealing with, on this diagram, B. And then they were fed, this algae was fed to mud snails, and again, mortality only from the algae that was taken from the treated wood. And from the reason for 2 ponds, Fort Pond and Middle Pond, is that in Middle Pond, there was a brand new bulkhead. It was less than a year old. Whereas in Fort Pond, it was several, 4 to 5 years old where they were constructed. And there was more of an immediate uptake from the fresh wood. The question is, how many years are we going to study this in order to see when does this slack off?
So they were just total CCA bulkheads
Yes.
from the 90s, right?
Built around 1990.
Right, so now there's nobody doing that, right?
Okay.
It's all vinyl, and any of the treated material is used for whalers or dead men or.
Now, if you look at the diagram again, you see we've mentioned B. C is going into sediments, and work that we did here at Southampton College, and while on sabbatical at an EPA lab in Pensacola, found
Florida.
Pensacola, Florida. Yes,
Yeah.
okay. Studying how far up from the bulkhead could you find a significant amount of these toxic metals. Must have come from the bulkhead. And there was 2 ways to look at it. One, we were working in a residential canal, so it was comparable to, let's say, Fort Pond. Or outside the residential canal on the open bay. And
So this was new bulkhead construction, or was it just existing bulkheads?
existing bulkheads.
Just existing.
Bulkheads. We don't know how old they were. What was living on the in the canal and the sediments was kind of scarce. Go to D on this diagram. As you see, sediments. You have worms living in the sediments, and the worms are picked up by some fish, and we fed, as in F, To juvenile fish, the two species of young of the year, you might call them bait fish. They didn't have the killies that we have here, but we had these two others. And the larval fish were not affected not knowingly, in that they seemed to be able to handle that, but they didn't grow as well. That's about it. Nobody died in the experiment. And the oysters that were living on the bulkhead, the oysters in Gulf of Mexico.
In Florida,
That's
there's
amazing.
oysters that live on the bulkheads. Any oysters around here, I've never seen any oysters living on a bulkhead, but in
They're
Florida,
starting, but yeah.
they were
Georgia
common.
and Florida have plenty.
Yeah, whenever there was a social event we got invited to, it was always an oyster roast. They had oysters coming out of their ears. But the oysters living on the bulkhead, the flesh was green.
Yeah, you open the oyster and it was actually green.
From lipids, high lipid fat content, or just
This is
Green from copper.
We analyzed the tissue, a lot of copper. Copper
Statue
is
of
leaching out
Liberty is
more than the other two metals by far. Copper was the bad guy, and copper is what most organisms are quite sensitive to. And then we had their version of oyster drills in the lab, feeding on the oysters from either the bulkhead, that wasn't turned green, or collected from rocks close to a mile away, but still near the laboratory we were working.
did you say a mile?
Actually, it was 1,200 meters, so that's about 8 cents of a mile. But open water, tidal flushes and so forth, as opposed to in the residential canal. And these oyster drills fed on the oysters, and the ones eating the, shall we say, green oysters grew about 40% less in that 2-month experiment. So they're obviously getting it from the food which came from that area. So we have what's called trophic transfer. Let's see. We analyze the sediments, and we have graphs showing what's in the sediment, in the mud, by the bulkhead. You have a lot. You get out 1 meter away, 3 meters away, which is 10 feet, and it's not quite so much elevated as compared to 10 meters away where it's very high, or where it's, shall we say, normal compared to the rest of the bay. So it's got an effect going out, as on letter D on this diagram, getting to the worms that are living in the sediment and available for trophic transfer to the predators. The oysters themselves, my friend there, there's a reason why one of the reasons we're working there at the EPA lab, he was an expert on histopathology. And he's looking at as a pathologist on aquatic organisms with the microscope, and we see that the digestive systems are in sad shape. Here, what's called metaplastic atrophy in the digestive systems. In case anybody uses that term, it's called. And there's a couple publications on that, including one that was showed that some genotoxicity, that another measure. Anyway, the ecological assessment on the benthic community, what's living on the bottom, and this was a project funded through the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, the National Estuary Program of NOAA, that we went to National Estuarine Research Reserves from North Carolina to Cape Cod and a couple places in between, and analyzed what was living in the mud by the bulkhead, 1 meter out, 3 meters out, 10 meters out, and the biological diversity was certainly depressed the closer you got to it, and especially in the residential canals where the water flushing is
Negative.
not as good as you have out in the open water.
Yeah, no flushing.
So that summarizes what we did in just a few
Right.
minutes.
So,
But I just want to say one last thing is that someone said, "What? Got arsenic in these 2x4s that the playground equipment is built out of?" And children keep their mouths on everything.
Maybe back in the day, I don't think that's right.
Could I,
And they, so the wood preservers said, okay, we'll take out arsenic. But to compensate, to make the pressure-treated wood more effective in resisting decay, is to put a lot more copper in it. And copper, as we found, was the one that leaches out the most to begin with and is the most toxic.
So breathing the sawdust from this stuff has really got to be bad for you, right?
do you guys, have you done any of the studies? Because I've been told that the reasoning that our tires and brake pads hold up is because of copper, chromium, arsenic as well. From the runoff, I just didn't know if that's.
Great findings?
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, of road runoff, and because we're all talking about
I don't know, I haven't looked at.
I hate any of it. I'd love to.
For a long time,
yeah.
and it was traditionally, it was asbestos.
It's just
which
the
of
stuff.
course-
I would love to see, I would love to see the other regulatory authorities synchronize with ours. It would make things.
There's a lot to learn here, and they keep going. I have sat through the several presentations that were offered to us by the by the tree wood folks, and again, thank you for offering a alternative to their point of view. However, so my view on this, and a few people have come to me in the public and asked me about this because there was an article in the press several weeks ago, and so my view is basically I'm very hesitant to overturn a decades-long precedent, given that our neighbors to the east and north have similar regulations. That being said, one of the issues I have with overturning overturning this potential ban is, CCA, as was stated, a lot of these chemicals are regulated by the EPA. Now, regardless of what people think of what's going on in Washington these days, with the EPA not being, maybe not fully staffed or fully funded, so I actually have a lot of reservations about the EPA currently regulating any chemicals, given that
Our
there's a
former
lot
congressman.
pushback with some, either regulations or even monitoring of the situation. So that's kind of my current position. Obviously, I'm open to hearing more. But however, my thing is, if tropical hardwoods aren't holding up, as my colleagues have said, what is good alternatives? Because obviously, we should be offering more alternatives aside from just tropical hardwoods. And now, obviously, there's some issues with plastics, with microplastics in the water. So, is there anything that you folks know of that could help us change our rules so we can allow more flexibility, short of doing CCA, short of lifting the ban?
I could talk to you about microplastics for a very long time, but I don't.
It's not an international-
If you want to say something, say something.
No, what I'm saying is, I think, we should be looking at alternatives. However, again, my position as of right now is I'm not in favor of lifting the ban, but however, I do think we should be looking at reasonable alternatives for the public use.
Well,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
that's why we're doing this.
Right. I mean, back when we did this, everybody didn't know much about plastics and effects of
Right.
plastics. So, and I have since gotten very involved with plastics. But the difference, I think, between the copper, which is the concern. It's not the chromium or the chromium, maybe a little bit, the arsenic hardly at all. For marine life, the issue is copper from this wood. Between copper and plastics, the copper is acutely toxic. I mean, it will kill them. A lot of critters, directly. Plastic doesn't do that to anything. Plastic is not toxic in that way. Plastic has chemicals in it that are subtle in their effects in terms of causing problems like messing up the endocrine system, so that you could have decreased reproduction in animals and in people too. So it's very hard to compare. This is leaching out and directly toxic. Plastic is a very subtle thing. The fact that we know we are full of microplastics, right? It's in our brains, it's in our heart, it's in our livers, everywhere. And we're still walking around. And we don't know what it's doing to us. We worry about it, but it's not killing us like that. If we had a lot of comparable amount of copper, well, we're not so sensitive to copper. If we had arsenic or chromium in our brains and in our livers and everywhere else, we would be, we wouldn't be talking to each other.
Could you possibly provide our office with an exact list of how many municipalities, not just including ours, but ours, East Hampton, any other towns, coastal towns that do have similar regulations to ours? Because I think that'd be good for our board to know.
Joe, I have a list of that.
But the thing is, but
All the
that's
towns.
helpful, but the problem still exists on our own bay bottoms, out of spec with the other regulatory authorities. And the
Right.
reality is, it's got nothing to do with this current EPA, because those changes were made long ago. Long ago, their permit changes were allowing this on our bottom, which created these problems that we have, this inconsistency in policy. The town just to the west of us is utilizing, whatever that they want to utilize, and once you cross that line,
To the east of you, where we live,
And north.
is in sync with us. So we're affected by that.
Or East End towns.
But the point is, if the state was in lockstep with us, okay, it would make it so much easier.
I have found, as I said before, whenever there's been action taken on this that I'm aware of, it was at a local town level. I don't know of anything larger, any county or state
Washington
that
State.
has.
Washington State
And-
banned it.
And
Germany and Vietnam.
in Europe, there's European countries.
Right, so the-
Germany, Vietnam is banned.
Right, but we-
It's also interesting too, because like, it would be lovely to ban the use of pre-emergence and pesticides and everything on lawns, but we don't have that ability on a town level to do such a thing because the stipulation is on a state level and we can't stop it. So I don't want us to have to end up in such a state. We're preemptively making sure that if there's people within this town that say, we're going to put in whatever we want, we don't want to be in a situation where we can't stop it. And that's where we are right now.
Right. We've got to be able to enforce our regulations so that we can maintain that consistency to protect the people and the environment. And this is merely a start of a conversation of a very complex issue, and that's what we're trying to do.
We do currently have the regulations, and it's on our underwater lands that we hold in trust for the people of the town. I know when the town trustees did this, ban, it was very controversial because many of the construction companies were very much, they didn't really have green heart. They didn't have the tropical hardwoods when they did the ban, and that's when they did the research and they started bringing in the tropical hardwoods versus the treated lumber. And I know
There's no official
but
mandate to do anything other
No.
than learn.
Yeah.
So
And I'm by trade, I'm a bayman. So I mean, these CCA and ACQ and these other woods that are used would be used. I don't think it's a good thing. I wouldn't take a CCA treated stake and put it in my garden to hold up my tomatoes.
Actually, that seems to be all right.
yeah, according to the
The migration
Correct.
into the soil is hard to measure.
correct.
Really?
Yes, exactly.
it's- It was just
One thing that this kind of was, what a
why
coincidence,
it's like
the
not
permit
just- yeah.
application for the 830B Dune Road, because they had CCA whalers, their lawyer put together something talking about how in marine environments, CCA leaching can be more persistent due to constant water exposure. They actually talk about when treated wood is exposed to rainwater or seawater, it penetrates the wood and dissolves the solution, which brings the CCA back up to the surface of the wood, where it then leaches out into the environment. So the act of the
Who said this?
This was a lawyer or a consultant put this together for a previous application.
I mean, it's so interesting because back in the day when, in the 90s, when we were giving talks at scientific conferences, at the meetings we go to, people don't wear suits, you know. Marine biologists tend to wear jeans and stuff like that.
Comfortable.
That's what I would
Yeah.
be wearing right now.
I was giving a talk at a meeting, and you know there was my people, the other marine biologists, and then in the back there's a bunch of guys in suits.
More of a wetsuit kind of
This
guy.
was the wood preservers, you know. So they were coming to listen to the talk, and they asked me a question that they apparently thought was going to really get me, which was a particularly stupid question. You know, but so they were.
But did you use statistics?
Did I use statistics? Of course, you know that's what
Right.
scientists do. So back then, they were really out trying to get us, and it was and I've heard about similar, you know, industries that are out to get scientists that are showing that their product is bad, and there's some outrageous behavior. And I'm just very glad that at the time when we were doing this, we were both established scientists already.
Right.
We weren't young folks, just, you know, even 30 years ago, we were mature, you
We're only in
know,
our 50s then.
established scientists and not youngsters. Because it would be really hard to be a newcomer in science
Right.
and get, you know,
Well,
an industry coming
if it
trying to
gives you
get
any
you.
comfort after all of the research you've done and the, you know, presentations you've made and all the energy and time you put into it, we don't have any official action here to deal with other than learning about this and trying to get the other regulatory authorities to synchronize with what we do, and for us to be able to have a good understanding and explaining to the constituents that are out of spec, and you know, utilizing sensibility and common sense. So I'm glad that you both took the time to come here today.
We are,
Thank you.
we're educators. We're retired educators.
Yeah,
And
so
this
it's
is our
nice to
job,
be
go
able
out,
to do
bring it
this.
Yeah.
But have you been talking with the East Hampton trustees? I mean, between the two towns, you're a sizable chunk of.
We
I
are.
Joe
I-
McLaughlin.
I have reached out, and Matt has reached out too, so we both have reached
Spoke
out.
to the president a few months back.
Got a good neighbor next
Yeah, no,
door.
we certainly have strength in numbers, but we're really on a fact-finding mission right now of gathering information. And then we could say to the, like, why are you permitting this on our bottom when our regulations are this? You're creating, you know, this enforcement issue for us. And it's a real problem because we have to deal with this. There has to be consistency in policy in the same water body because otherwise it doesn't make sense. We all need to be rowing in the same direction or the boat's just going to go round in circles here. And sometimes that's what happens and it's not productive.
If I could ask you guys back to the graph about the impacts of the leaching. Like imagine, I don't know, I don't see it represented on here. Imagine, you know, single-celled microalgae or larval shellfish that have just been released into the water column. Do you think that the CCA, fresh CCA, could have a negative impact on free-floating organisms?
A couple more copies if somebody.
Yeah, we'll take them. Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, I say that specifically because
Sure,
those are
we
that's the
did
feedstock
not-
for those shellfish.
Plankton and larvae, but we know that the fish embryos didn't develop right. So, you know, I would, if I had a lab and you know, was still equipped to do this sort of thing, I would investigate larvae. Because I think they are much more likely to be even more sensitive than the adults of the animals of the species
Well,
we looked at.
In light of the success of the Shinnecock Bay restoration, a project that the trustees partnered with, the Southampton Stony Brook College and working with Cornell Cooperative Extension and Governor's Clean Water Task Force, we've had great success in, the clam population and some of the oyster populations in the South Shore Estuary, where we're talking about, these materials being absent for, almost 40 years. So is coincidence that there's no, or limited CCA treated lumber has been used in this environment? And it's one of the things that maybe helped the shellfish population boom almost 1,000% in the last 5 years. So, I mean,
I would like to say yes. I don't know. I know that shellfish populations have had a lot of problems due to disease, certain parasitic diseases. I know the oysters.
QPX, MSX.
And the scallops.
Yep.
And I think that that's a major issue affecting those populations, is
I think you're right.
infectious diseases, more than, I wouldn't give credit to the
I don't think
banning of CCA.
I don't
Yeah,
think
it may not be a
it's- I
giant
don't
enough
think-
concentration relative to the water body.
thing or one single event that
Right.
has happened to do the restoration, make it successful. I think it's multiple things, runoff, limiting lumbers and chemicals and pump out boat programs. There's a multiple
That's correct.
multiple things that we've done to make our waters cleaner and better. So
When you do that, you find that things
Right.
come back.
See, now it seems as though the next venue that we're going to have to tackle is getting consistency in policy from the other regulatory authorities so that we can get the benefits that we truly need and not have enforcement issues on our own bottomlands. And this is not going to be easy. This is going to be a process. It's got to be a very calculated, very, lengthy process in trying to achieve that,
Right.
because we have issues.
If you work together with East Hampton trustees, perhaps that would.
well, we have had joint trustee meetings, Southold, East Hampton, and Southampton several times, or more than several times on my tenure on the board. And I think it's time that maybe we have another one of these meetings and bring them in and have a couple topics, CCA treated lumber, and a few other topics.
I would go a step further and say I think we could do that and have an invite from the people that are actually the policy decision makers at those other levels to explain the rationale and start the conversation there to say, what gives,
Why not then work, forgetting New York State, work at the Suffolk County level?
Well, they're not really a permitting agency on our bottomlands, so that's why I say we have a policy issue. So we want to make sure that and again, I don't want to do this like we're poking people in the eye. There has to be logic and reason for what's going on. You're having a good discussion and you're bringing out excellent points, and I'm just scratching my head with where is it at that level and why are we in this quagmire right now? So I can't thank you enough for coming down. It's been very helpful.
Yes.
And the board, and this is going to take time. I mean, this is not like the short flight from MacArthur to Baltimore. This is going to be one of those, like, how many movies can we watch?
Pong.
Exactly. These things take a lot of time. But in the interim, every project that we do and the trustees, everything is environmentally as friendly as it could be. We are concerned about some of this tropical hardwood that comes in. It is not holding up. The pilings are splitting open. We are concerned, is it really sustainably sourced? Is it not? Are we doing more harm than good? These are a lot of important questions that have to be answered, but I commend the board for professionally and intelligently trying to resolve the issue, understanding it's going to be difficult and understanding it's going to take time. And that being said, I want to let you have your afternoon, and we have to finish our agenda as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anytime you wish to get in touch with us about this.
Thank you so much for coming.
Some of these documents that you have, can you stop at 240 West Montauk Highway in Hampton Bays and give them
We'll make
to our
copies.
secretary so we can make copies of them? Because I'd love to read
Sure.
some of this material that you've researched on.
I think the most important thing would be a review article that we
It summarized everything.
Some summarizes everything, and
The paper looks like it's been around. I don't want to.
Neither do I, yeah. If you drop by our office, I'm sure they could help you.
And marine biologist too, so it's got watermarks on them.
I mean, I guess we could leave all of it with you if you would.
Are you you're somewhat local too?
East Hampton and Springs.
Springs, okay, because we have an office at 240 West, and we could make the
And
copies
I'm
for
out
you.
there regularly as well. I'm out in East Hampton
I just
almost a daily basis.
Okay.
If they want to have it all, let them have all of it.
Okay.
And
I would love to read it.
If we could print it, if we could have our staff print it, and then I can
Yeah.
return it to you in person.
You gonna handle that person? You're gonna be-
I will hand it to
He's
you
going to
in
be the
person.
steward of the documents.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so
If you're not comfortable with that, we would
Well,
understand that too.
I have copies of these in a file drawer in Newark, New Jersey, where I have a little bit of an office remaining
All right.
in my department. Whereas he had these
pen.
at home, which was fortunate because we were home in New York City and could find these. This is not all of the papers we produced. This is the ones he happened to have at home.
Gotcha. All right, so what are we doing? What's the plan?
Okay, I think this review article really summarizes everything kind of
Okay.
Let
nicely.
me look.
240 in Montauk.
240 West Montauk, Hampton Bays. If you want to drop by there, I'm sure Lisa, so we can help make some copies for the board members.
Or they can give it now, and then I can
Yeah,
make
that
sure they
seems
get
Whichever
it.
they're
makes more sense.
comfortable with.
We could just mail it back to them
Copies
too.
of
Yeah.
all of them,
Yeah,
not just.
Yeah.
the more.
We want you, we want you to be comfortable with your documents.
Okay.
And we'll trust you.
Don't need my
Since you're
notes.
trustees, you
They're gonna
must be
They're
trusted.
gonna trust the
Trustee at your
trustees.
service. Yeah.
Trust the trustees. Thank you.
So, Lisa.
Thank you.
There you are, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much.
Thank you
Enjoy
so
your
much.
afternoon.
Thank you for a very informative.
Enjoy your afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to,
Traffic on 30 on 27.
let-
See what it's like getting back. to
yeah,
the-
right?
Oh,
Going east, you'll be all right.
You should be okay now.
Monday, so you good, yeah.
Thank you.
You know,
Don't count on it.
it's an afternoon and it's still June and it's a weekday and it's still the traffic.
Cars everywhere. So we have public hearings, right?
Yes.
So the first one, thank you.
Does anybody want to, on
Oh, we got, no, we have
the
to,
public
Public
portions? We'll do the public hearings first.
yeah, public hearings first.
Mailing address?
That's it. What we just gave you, 240 West Montauk.
No,
No, there's-
His
yours?
mailing address.
Or mailing
Our
address.
Give it to-
mailing address.
Give it to
Yeah,
Lisa.
You may want to,
Yeah, physical, a physical or mailing, whatever you want me to deliver.
Except this thing is just a snail mail.
Yeah.
so the first public hearing,
Bell Road, BELL, East Hampton. 11937.
Yeah, we got you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
take care now.
Thank you.
All right, so we got the first public hearing, Oksana Lashko, 12 Bayview Drive East. We're going to adjourn this, right? I'd like to,
Yeah, I'd like,
No, this was a hearing that was held, I believe, back in May, the second meeting in May,
May 19th.
and we put it over to today. The applicant was supposed to file an application for a permit with us by, I believe, June 2nd. They didn't.
They were supposed to have plans and, right, Charlotte?
Oh, okay. Well, in any event, there's been a request for an adjournment on the part of the neighbors. The attorney representing them is having back surgery. And in light of the fact that the revised plans haven't made it to our office, I would suggest that we adjourn this to July 14th.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
seconded by trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Okay, that's adjourned. And you have another one, notice of public hearing, consider revocation of mooring permits of Josh Belori.
I've been in contact with the attorney for Mr. Belluri. I've determined to my satisfaction that he is affiliated with the Scouts. I requested that an insurance certificate be sent to us from the Scouts on his behalf, since he is, I only put that through this morning, Lise, so we haven't gotten it yet.
Okay, I was just saying I didn't get it.
Yeah, no, and I spoke with counsel, who agreed with me that July 14th would be the proper date. She would get the certificate to us.
I'll make the motion to
July
to
14th?
July 14th, to the July 14th thing.
I'll second that.
The issue of draw.
Seconded.
draw-
By trustee-
Sorry, the issuance of the permit will be based upon
Well,
the,
the permit is currently in existence,
Yeah.
but I want the insurance company
By
for
the
the, for the
14th.
skate, for the scouts
yeah,
to say, yeah,
by July 14th.
yes.
Okay.
You good?
Yep.
All right, so it was seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, then you have a notice of public hearing on amendment of rules and regulations, management of products of waters, considering amending the management, Article 5, Section 38, waterfowl hunting.
Okay, this was a change in the Blue Book that was proposed to allow the holders of duck blind permits to make a reach out to the town of Southampton Marine Patrol by way of SOS to get their blinds inspected. This centralizes the process and it removes any confusion as to how it was done in the past. It was a phone call, it was, I saw somebody. Now there has to be a paper trail initiated by the applicant through the town system.
So we're opening this hearing.
Yes.
So I'll make a motion to open that hearing.
Second.
Seconded, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the hearing is open. I believe it's very helpful for the Marine Patrol, Bay Constables, and for the applicants to have a formalized system. I really do. I think it's a good thing. It cleans it up. It's
Gives everybody accountability and we can track them. So,
correct.
Right. I mean, in the past, there have been some confusing permits where people have reached out. They see one of the Bay Constables on the street. I called. I did this. This way, there's a uniform procedure. There's a paper trail, and there's accountability on the part of everybody.
Okay.
I would suggest we close the hearing.
I will second that.
Well, he can't make a motion. He's the council,
I'll
so
make, I'll-
just second that.
Does anybody, see if
Is there
there's
anybody-
Yeah,
anybody.
is anybody on Zoom?
Hello?
No one on Zoom.
Beautiful. All right.
I'll make a motion that we close.
So Mr. Trustee Warner made a motion.
Second it.
Seconded, trustee Merritt, all in favor?
Aye.
The public hearing is closed. Now let's go to public portion. Anybody here in the public would like to address the board? 3 minutes. How about on Zoom?
No one on Zoom.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go to the applications for permits. I'll make a motion to close public portion.
Second.
Seconded, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Trustee Warner, you're up.
We have trustee resolution 2025-181, application of Madison Avenue Capital Partners LLC, 1323 Meadow Lane, Village of Southampton, Suffolk County Tax Map 900-22-1-19.1, body of water, Shinnecock Bay. We went over this at work session. It's compliant to what we need as far as adoption. I recommend its approval. I need a second.
Second.
Seconded, trustee McLaughlin, all in favor?
Trustee Resolution 2025-182. This is an application of 149 Rose Hill Road, Wintermill, New York, and this is on Water Playground Cove. This is one we spoke of in work session, and we had them orient the dock where it was a good location for.
Okay.
Recommended approval.
Second on
Seconded,
that.
trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
So when it's 3 this is a new application for 340, 422, and 452, and 496 and 520 First Neck Lane for the Agawam, Agawam, and also the Agawam and the constituency application for tax map 904-13-1-26 by War Lake Agawam. Can I have a second?
Second on that.
Seconded, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Resolution 184-25, this is a special no application for 308 Cap Point Road, 308 Cap Point by Davis Creek, again, tax map 900, 900-9-1-20. Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded, trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye. Trustee resolution 2025-185, authorized payment of UMC Medical Consultants, PC. Recommend its approval. I need a second on that.
Seconded trustee McLaughlin, all in favor?
Aye.
Trustee Resolution 2025-186, authorized payment service into science for Mecox, Sam's Creek, Swan Creek, and Hayground Cove. I recommend its approval. I need a second on this.
Second it.
Seconded trustee Marin, all in favor?
Aye. Trustee Resolution 2025-187, warrant number 10 for 2025 for the trustees for the sum of $59,837.87. The register reads as such: Joe Lombardo, $3,700. James E. Olivo, $2,500. Van Butel Ford Inc., $53,133.33, and W.B. Mason for $500.54 for a total of $59,837.87. I recommend its approval. I need a second.
Seconded trustee McLaughlin, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we've got trustee resolution 2025-188, notice of adoption of amendment of Blue Book A340. Whereas the trustees of Hills and Commonality of the Town of Southampton consider the change in the rules and regulations for the management on Monday, June 16th, to hear any and all persons either for or against legislative intent. The Board of Trustees, Article 5, Section 38 of the Rules and Regs of the Products, Permit Rules and Regulations. A waterfowl hunting location permit holder must install grass and have their duck blind ready to be used for hunting by no later than December 31st of each year. Prior to December 31st of each year, all permit holders must schedule a visual inspection of their duck boat and/or floating duck blind that is used in multiple locations. The trustees are authorized to establish and promulgate rules and regulations for the management of products of the waters of the town of Southampton pursuant to the Dongan Patent of 1686 and subsequent acts of New York Legislature, including Chapter 255 of the Laws of 1818, Chapter 283 of the Laws of 1831. Change will take effect immediately upon the adoption of the amendment. This proposed amendment to the Blue Book establishes a new procedure to schedule an appointment with the Marine Patrol for inspecting permit duck blinds. Copies of the amendment to the Blue Book sponsored by the trustees, Scott M. Horowitz, is available in the trustee's office.
I'll give you a
I'll make a
second.
motion.
Second on that.
Seconded trustee Warner, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Is there any other, we've had a busier day than I thought we were gonna have here. We've had a very busy day. Is there any other discussion? Mecox?
Mecox is great. The cut refuses to close. And same with SAG.
SAG. Well, that's good.
Is it super,
The salinity has been ranging around 19.
the velocity of the water,
Very slow.
very slow.
It's basically become tidal and it's coming in and then flowing out. So it's kind of keeping itself open, but it's a very safe environment.
So it's not at a dangerous low level?
No,
No.
it's maintaining itself at a reasonable level.
It's got a status quo equilibrium that it's maintaining with proper salinity and a better water quality flushing situation that we have going on there right now.
And to maintain 19, and the bacteria levels of both Gobler's Lab and the Surfrider Foundation have been within swimmable Suffolk County levels up to this date.
So there you go.
And minimal no.
No blue-green algae. And I would also like to note, we did just install the Surfrider signs on both sides of the cut and both sides of at the Sag Bridge and at Sag Main, so the public can see what the levels of bacteria are in Mecox Bay proper and on the ocean side at their own. And there's a contact information that will directly link you with Suffolk County, and they can answer any further questions about water quality within Mecox Bay and Sag Pond and the ocean beaches. So the public can make an informed decision of whether they want their children and or animals to swim in the bay.
Okay, that's good.
One other thing just came across the Coconut Telegraph. Katie Rossi Snook has notified us that their system is jammed up when they have our spat on shell. And what do we want to do with it?
Put it in Quantic.
Put it in Quantic. Now, is that under the terms of the contract, that is their responsibility to remote plant it, or is that ours?
They usually do the planting. if they need help, they can ask the marine maintenance, but they have a boat and
So the
They've done
email
most-
came to me for some reason, but you were attached to it, so.
I haven't looked at my
Yeah,
files.
but I think we should, because I know this is a tough time of year as far as a hatchery, because you're trying to juggle.
Everything's growing too fast.
Everything's growing too fast, and you're trying to get as much out of the system,
Well,
so we
let's-
should contact.
Let's
her sooner than
coordinate,
later.
see if they need Timmy and the marine maintenance guys,
Okay,
coordinate with them.
all right. I'll contact her after the meeting.
Yeah.
Is there anything further? I think that we've had good discussions today.
No, that's
We've
it.
on our learning path here.
Yeah.
There is no official action of the Board of Trustees relative to CCA materials, so it's just learning, and I think it's good. The more people we talk to, the more we learn. Okay. Anybody else? Got anything? Nothing? Anyone down at that end of the table?
Good.
Hey, listen, cue the music. I make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second, Trustee Warner, all in favor?
All right.